Alright, another draft physics video presentation. Comments, and there's a couple of rude ones that I'm going to include because they do have an argument connected to them. But whatever. Just let's point out again, these cowards, and they're cowards, won't do any kind of live interaction. They can't get a microphone to work on their computer apparently, and they can't be accountable for anything. These people who are blocked because of the rudeness can just send emails. They don't send any with all this great information for me to debunk that's undebunkable proof that they're right and I'm wrong. They can't provide any of this evidence. And then they can't, like I said, do the simple thing of just providing a civil response to the physics I've argued, right? There's physics in my videos. They can argue it. I played Professor Lewin saying radio waves are standing waves, right? And I show how that doesn't make any sense. And then I could actually show you 2-3 lectures before the lecture where he's showing it's a standing wave. He actually burns the bulb out on the antenna by moving it closer to the antenna, demonstrating there's no standing wave. Standing waves can't do that. Just no. So instead of responding to how I'm wrong and pointing out how no, radio waves aren't standing waves, they do this crap. So anyway, this is an idiot. Sorry, he's calling me an idiot, but yes, obviously he's the idiot. Defending Miles Mathis' stupid pi equals 4 garbage. So I mean, I think I explained how it's really different when an external force turns you. So if you're sitting here and you're going straight, an external force shows up and moves you into a new direction, and you don't have to do anything. It moves you. It's a lot different than if you have to hit a surface, some kind of object, and the object is going to force you. Okay, the rigidity of the object, and you're going to have to keep hitting it, punching into it, punching into it, punching into it to change your direction. Well, that's obviously going to slow you down. You're obviously sort of crashing into a brick wall, okay, in a way, right? A turning brick wall. And yes, you're going to keep hitting it, and you're going to lose your velocity. You're going to have to use your energy to turn, because there's no external force that's going to turn you. So your energy has to be used, so your velocity declines. And you can use a ton of simple examples. I mean, they've actually done these experiments where you take a tube of, metal pipe, and you can shoot a gun into it, and the bullet will come out perpendicular, but it comes out at a hugely slower rate, right? Like almost half the velocity. You could think of a baseball player throwing a baseball into a loop, and you could figure out, if he throws a 90-mile-an-hour fastball in, it's only going to be a 70-mile-an-hour fastball out, because the friction is going to consume the velocity. This is not complex physics. This is kind of easy. And for Miles Mathis not to get it, to not realize that gravity is an external pushing force, an active force, another force, and that a curved tube isn't a force, is pretty dumb. It's insanely dumb. So you're insane. You're not idiots, you're insane. You're so stupid. You clearly have, I'll just throw an insult just for the fun of it, right? You clearly have such an inverted penis that your brain is obviously full of semen, and it's encephaloided your brain cells, and they're all smushed against your skull. Fucking idiots. Okay, also learn to stay away from alcohol and weed. Well, obviously I don't drink much and I don't smoke much, so that's not much of a comment. And it's just so cliche. And why don't you want to be, if these are such brilliant insults even, why wouldn't you want to take credit for them and have a real account? Huh? Well, how come? How come you're such a pussy that you don't want to take credit for these incredibly, original insults? Like nobody's used this stupid drug insult about 7 million times. Well, why don't you take your medication? Why don't you use that one? It's so lame. All right, anyway. You honestly believe that a very small increase in rolling resistance, so he says it's a little increase in rolling resistance when you make a 90-degree turn, okay? In the circular tube, so again, a circular tube is a lot of turning. You're making 4 90-degree turns, technically. well, three. You know, 1, 2, 3. There's a fourth one, but you know. You're making 4 turns, idiot. 4 90-degree turns. That's what a circle is. You don't get that? But yeah, that's what it adds up to, shithead. I mean, shit for brains. I mean, semen for brains. Oh, fuck. Alright, circular tube causes 20% longer travel time for the same distance traveled. Yes, if your velocity is, if a 90-mile-an-hour fastball gets to the batter faster than a 70-mile-an-hour fastball. That's right. Oh, man, how can it be this dumb and this arrogant? I'm a very good physicist. No, you're a fucking retarded. And I'll like to prove it. Please, come on. Learn how to use the audio and video on your computer, and let's do a live room so you can show us how you're a very good physicist. Look, moron, you're too short for this ride. No, you're too semen clogged for anything useful. If you want to debunk it, then set up your own apparatus. Why? The guy in Norwegia already did the fucking experiment quite adequately. You can see the tube moving. I mean, this is how dumb they are. Well, let me just, just try to illustrate it briefly. But I mean, it shouldn't require illustration. It's just beyond stupid. I mean, look, okay, normal people, normal high school dropouts, I can see how they can't get anything. But come on, this isn't that complicated. So obviously the argument is that, see, Miles Mathis is trying to say these two things are the same. So let's just put a round thing in the center of a race car track, okay? We'll just put a round thing in there, just for fun. And then you have the Earth, and you have something like the moon going around it. Now, what we know is when the moon's going around the Earth, okay, the moon isn't hitting anything, right? That there's an active force called gravity that's essentially pushing it in. Now, if you want to believe it's pulling it in, it doesn't really matter. But the truth is it's pushing it in. There's more pressure here, high pressure out here, and there's low pressure in here, and the moon falls easily into it because it doesn't have to do any work. It's getting the force of gravity. The real thing that exists is doing the active pushing. Like a god, it's pushing. They even have analogies like that. In the olden days, they were thought little angels were pushing the earth into, with their little wings. It's an active thing helping to get around the corner. This race car doesn't have anything helping it. There's no external force pushing it in. Nothing. So when it decides to go around these turns, it has to interact with the physical matter, and the physical matter doesn't like it. Like, say if this was a dirt track, what you'll see is the back of the car will swing out and a bunch of dirt will fly in the air, and you don't think that's all wasted energy. The engine's spinning, the engine's working, and a bunch of dirt's flying all over the place. The fans, if you were sitting in the stands, you're getting all dirty faced. You don't remember that when you were a kid with daddy drinking the beer and shit? You don't remember going to the dirt tracks when you were a kid? Idiot. And rooting with your you don't remember your sponge #1 finger and shit? So when it's going around the turn, there's a tremendous amount of waste. And it's just like that for a runner. So if this was a runner just running and he has to go around this turn, you have never ran where you actually made a turn somewhere and you realize, it's all this extra friction I have to apply. My feet get all funny. Everything's not working quite right. It's a little bit awkward and unpleasant, and you hit the ground harder, and so you don't understand that you're moving a lot slower when you're running around the curve, because you have to use a whole bunch more energy to move the ground to account for this change in direction. So all the energy has to come from you. You're the only thing moving in the freaking diagram. You move, everything else is stationary, and you're going to change direction. That means the direction change has to come from your energy. Your energy has to be used to change direction. Here, the change in direction isn't used by the moon's energy. The moon's velocity doesn't get changed any because there's an external thing that's basically picking it up and saying, go this way, go this way, go this way, go this way. It's magically picking up and turning it. You can look at it a lot of different ways, but there's absence of it. It means that there's no loss of energy from the moon because it doesn't have to do the turning. If you have to provide the turning, the energy for it, if there's no other force that's going to help you turn, then your velocity has to decline by the amount of friction it's going to require for you to make the turn. And it's going to require some substantial friction. A U-turn, okay, is going to require you to make two square right angle turns, two 90-degree turns. You're going to make 180 degrees of change, okay, and it has to come out of your velocity. Dumbass. I mean, it's just not that complicated. And only an idiot could not understand gravity's a force. It's not a bent piece of track. The moon isn't throwing sparks off as it rubs against the gravity. It's just not a complex argument. There's no physical example on Earth of anything that changes direction for free. Unless it's going up and it's gravity and it turns and it falls very fast because it's going with the extra force, not against it. All right. Set up an apparatus eliminating the deficiencies. Again, I claim no deficiencies in the apparatus beyond the fact that you can't make something frictionless. We don't have a practical, obviously the more frictionless you can make it, the better. But even if you put like a slick oil, the oil's going to stick to it. It's going to create some adhesion. You're just not going to get away with it. And run the experiment again, showing results that contradict those of the original video. I'm not contradicting the results of the video at all. I'm clearly stating to you that you see no decline in the moon's speed like you do with the ball, okay? Because pi doesn't equal 4. And gravity is an active force. And I'm also saying they're using an equation that's completely irrelevant. They're using the equation you use to convert from degrees to arc seconds. It's a conversion equation. It's not a velocity equation for how fast something moves in gravity or in friction. Idiot. Okay. That's how real science is done. So he says real science, if it was done right, would come up with this idiotic notion that pi equals 4 because he proved somehow, okay, that the moon has to be losing velocity or something. I don't know. It's like I said, you can't make any sense out of it. The equation is used for things in frictionless gravity, right? That's the implication, is that even though they had the wrong equation, they're implying that if you do this math correctly, if you apply the moon's force theorem, that is a gravity theorem, to a track that doesn't have gravity, that somehow you're supposed to get the same answer, and you're not supposed to get the same answer. They're supposed to be different. Jesus, you can't be this dumb, right? You're playing global warming again. So again, this is hilarious. Let's deny the fact that we've taken a ton of black, obviously black stuff, looks a lot like carbon, and thrown it into the atmosphere. Let's just ignore the fact that we can actually measure how much is in the atmosphere because of the frozen ice and all kinds of different things. We can tell that there's twice as much or whatever it is. And let's just ignore the fact that we know it's a greenhouse gas. Yes, it's not the worst offender, but it's an offender. And let's just pretend that we don't know that the whole point of the whole global warming thing is that it's it spirals out of control, is the potential, like Venus. It spirals out of control. And once you make it a little bit warmer, that puts more water, the air holds more water the warmer it is, right? So you end up holding more water in the environment. You heat the surfaces. It's really not the air holding more, it's the fact that the surfaces are hot and they hold less. So as you heat the surface of the earth, you make it hotter, it holds less moisture then. So the only place for the moisture to go is the atmosphere, and once the moisture gets into the atmosphere, it's a really good greenhouse gas. You people just can't, you're so fucking stupid. But I mean, really, you don't think there's any difference? We take all that coal and all that oil, half the oil, out of the fucking goddamn ground that was put in there over millions of years, and exactly at the same time that the Earth's temperature went from, a mean of whatever, 65 centigrade to 60 degrees centigrade, which is a lot for the whole planet. But anyway, where obviously Jurassic was warmer, okay, and it got colder now than it is then. Okay, dinosaurs can't live where, they used to live because it's cold now. So clearly the world, the Earth, was a different place. And what's the difference? Well, a bunch of carbon that was in the atmosphere isn't in the atmosphere anymore. It's in the fucking ground. And then we took the carbon that's in the fucking ground and we put it back in the atmosphere. And you can't put two and two together and figure out that, well, yeah, that's a rational correlation. It makes sense that if you put the stuff back into the atmosphere that the dinosaurs took out, that you'll put it back the way it was when the dinosaurs existed. Duh. Alright, anyway. I mean, even if the whole asteroid theory, even if the asteroid thing didn't create the cataclysmic event, the dinosaurs were essentially doomed. Because the fact is that the active biology was burying, over time, a ton of carbon. And it was inevitably going to get colder. Shit, these people are just so fucking stupid. Alright, that's how real science, you're playing global warming pseudoscience. So again, it's pseudoscience to do that 2 + 2 thing. Where you make pronouncements based on dogma. So where's the dogma? It's dogma that dinosaurs existed? And you think that's dogma? Because you're a godbother, right? And without evidence, let alone any actual experiments. I don't have to redo experiments that I've already done. I can demonstrate something quite obviously. I'm just saying go back to the Norwegian guy's video and watch the track moving. Where do you think the energy is coming from for the plastic track to move? Who's providing it? And if the track is moving, how can the thing's velocity be the same if it's making something else move? It doesn't have an engine. It can't step on the gas pedal and create more energy. It can't, even on a dirt track, press on the gas pedal and waste some extra energy that it wasn't using anyway, but it can't apply any more velocity. So if it can't apply any more velocity and the track is moving, where do you think the energy came from to move the track, idiot? It has to come from its velocity. That's the easy answer, you dumb fuck. So, well, anyway. So, but yes, you're blocked. I mean, look, there's a minimum standard of rudeness here. If you can't handle it, then you can't handle it, okay? I don't call your mother some kind of name before you show up and insult me. So you just don't have any right to show up and start being an insulting asswipe until I've insulted you, fuckface. So you'll have to email your little snottyisms. But you won't manage that, because then I'll know your email address, right? Yeah, so you'll have to have some kind of credibility then. You'll be somebody then. Somebody accountable. And you can't be accountable for what you say, you pussy. People are just so weak. Alright, so now to a less rude comment. Alright, Perv Action, who, his comments haven't been too good, and his name isn't too good, but whatever. This came out very long. Sorry in advance. I hope some of it is worthwhile contribution. Feel free to read it off camera if you think it's too time wasty. Long comments are okay if they're on a real subject and some kind of sincerity is involved, then fine. Most of your arguments are scarily conclusive. I don't know why that would be scary. And fit all kinds of behaviors. Well, that's what I'm sort of illustrating, is it fits better and it's smaller, which means it wins the Occam razor thing. It's a simpler theory that does more, which means it's got to be better than the existing crap. It wins on both accounts. Coverage, okay, it's like if it was paint. It covers more and you use less. It wins. You shouldn't be selling the other crap. Okay, it recently struck me how well your model fits with static electricity. Uh, I mean, obviously, charge is fundamental in the sense that there's positive and negative, and the real connection is that it's just obvious that the magnetic monopoles are the charge monopoles, and electrons and protons. And how listening to you made me think of it mainly as a magnetism phenomenon. Well, obviously, it's sort of a charge phenomenon, because I guess I would argue that the monopoles come first, making them into a dipole comes second. So the fact that electrons are electrons and the fact that protons are protons is the more rudimentary fact. And the fact that you can put them close to each other and make a magnet is a emergent fact. And the fact that, so I guess technically I would say that the electric universe is correct in the sense that charge is the elemental function. Magnetism is the emergent function that happens when you make atoms out of charges. And the fact that a balloon rubbed and charged with static electricity diverts a stream of falling water. Well, you can give water charge, which is the part that's relevant. So I can't remember what the battery you can make using buckets, metal buckets, and falling water. And you can make a battery out of it because the water gets charged as it goes through. The plastic works better, the tubing. It comes out, moves, gets more charged by the atmosphere, rubbed. There's friction. Wherever water travels, there's friction. The friction creates ions. And so it's like any other charge phenomenon. It ionizes, therefore it polarizes the thing that might be outside it. So something near it is going to sense the positive charge and react by becoming negatively charged on its surface. And so, yes, the phenomenon can exist. Now, the fact that, see, people can make this connection as if magnets and charge, because they're fundamentally the same thing, you're just moving two charges next to each other, that magnetism and charge have the same density in terms of their field strength. Well, they don't. Charge, perfect relationship between two charges, is the R rule. Okay, the force only cuts in half. You go half the distance, it's half as strong, that's it. Okay, for a dipole, for a magnet, you go half the distance, it's cubed. Okay, it's R cubed. So it's not just twice as weak, it's 3 times weaker because of the dipole, because the two at a distance start blending into each other. So you have to be close to the charge, isolated, to get the strongest effect. So charges have huge, they seem so much stronger. See, and this is another thing they draw kind of inaccurately, because when they draw this light thing having the two waves, the truth is they concede is the magnetic portion of a photon is actually like 1,000,000 times weaker, okay, than the electric portion of a photon. So the electric wave is like 1,000,000 times stronger than the magnetic portion. Something they don't even say, but their math says so. Anyway. Okay. Fitz static electricity. How listening to you made me think of it mainly as a magnetism phenomenon. Well, you shouldn't think of it as a magnetism phenomenon, because the surfaces are actually doing electron and proton in a sense. So the water is becoming proton and the surface of the metal is becoming electron. So, and like I said, a magnet isn't electron and proton, it's the two smashed together. But it is the same thing, I'm just saying. It's just that you have to understand that dipoles are a lot weaker. Their charge is diluted. Clearly, if I have, a red thing and a black thing, and I put them really close to each other, then the force of the black is going to be going this way into the red field, and the red stuff's going to be going into the black field. So the strength of the charge is getting diluted because there's a whole portion here where the two fields are mixing, and that becomes neutral. It's attraction and then repulsion at the same time, and it's a net zero. So the charge is much stronger, so to speak, as something that can affect the universe when they're separated, not when they're together. Okay. Made me think of mainly it's a magnetism phenomenon, and the fact that a balloon rubbed and see, so a magnet will bend light, but you need a really strong magnet. I mean, it will bend the water. It's still an electric field. It's just that you can't use just a little magnet, and because the magnet doesn't have enough, it doesn't have enough penetrating power. So you have to get the magnet really, really close to the water. Yeah. Anyway, and the fact that a balloon rubbed and charged with static electricity diverts a stream of falling waters, and in my opinion also supports your theory. Well, it's kind of a long way to go to say it supports my theory. I mean, it supports the charge theory. My theory isn't really any different than, again, if you look at Maxwell's drawings, that's my theory, except Maxwell, ironically, even though he did draw stuff in two colors, okay, I mean, he just didn't think of the force as having two colors. So he has drawings of, positive charge and negative charge, and he's clearly recognizing that the two charges are different, two charged things are different, and clearly what he just demonstrates is that it's a straight line force, and that these two forces, if I put the third object in, another electron, that clearly whatever this one is expelling is repulsive to the electron. So the lines, if they terminate in another positive or negative charge thing, that it will be repulsive in its impact, and that it will be attractive in its impact when it hits the red thing. And what he does not understand is, well, it's attractive because this doesn't reflect off that, where this reflexes off that, and this reflects back off that, and so this causes a trap, and this is no trap, and there's an external force that makes no trap significant. So if there's no reflection here, then there's no pressure to counterbalance this external pressure, and the electron moves in. So it's not attracted, it's still being pushed. It's not being pulled. But I mean, the drawings are there, and they perfectly validate what I'm saying, in the sense that the elemental drawings are fundamentally exactly what I'm saying. His elemental theory is that it's a straight line force radiating from these charged objects. And all he doesn't do, which seems perfectly logical because he didn't know it, he didn't have any extensive knowledge of electrons and protons, is that these little charged things in atoms are doing exactly this thing. And so I don't know what I can say. No, I'm just saying, if Maxwell lived longer, I think he would have done what I did, because it was right next to it. He was so close to getting the right answer, but he just didn't understand enough nuclear physics. He didn't have enough information about the nature of charge to be able to deduce the obvious, that, oh yeah, electrons and protons are the magnetic monopoles. He would have said it. Anyway. So where was I? Opinion supports your theory. Let's see. And the fact that a balloon rubbed with charge with static electricity diverts a stream of water, in my opinion, also supports your theory. So while watching you, I heard myself think. So if you are saying magnetism is not metallicity bound, that you're making up words. That's okay with me, but that's a made-up word. To an even more basic proton-electron interaction. Well, clearly, I don't know how else I can say it any clearer. 2 + 2 + 2. I mean, there's two kinds of matter, there's two kinds of force, and there's two kinds of interaction, reflection and transmission at a angle, perpendicular angle. That's it. Yes. All right. Is everything a magnet? No, everything is a charge. everything. So if you want to be, there's only two things, right? So let's just say the force things, let's just call them not things for a while. Okay, the matter things, there's only two kinds of matter, electron and proton. Neutron is a composite of the two. And the atom is clearly a composite of electrons and protons. I don't know what to say. So clearly everything's charge. Everything's electrons and protons. And when you put electrons and protons together, you create a composite that's a magnet. Okay. So if you say magnetism is not metallically, illicitly bound, but an even more basic electron proton, is everything a magnet? No. Everything's charge. Clearly. I mean, the two forces are two kinds of charged force. There's black and red, and there's black and red. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. And yeah, water seems to agree on some level. Regarding 2 plus 2 plus c. So you've heard me say 2 plus 2 plus 2 physics, and you're still asking questions that just shouldn't be asked. Two kinds of force, positive, negative, north, south, however you want to describe it. Two kinds of matter, north, south, positive, negative, however you want to describe it. That's it. I drew some parallels to chemistry and its psi scale, psi scale, and how it too goes in only two directions. I know that's the nature of a scale, but as a kid I thought it to be more complicated, and basically describes just the exchangeability rate of electrons. Well, whether something exchanges electrons, this gets a little tricky, right? Because their whole theory is that there's an electron that's being shared and it's going around and around, and then their whole theory of electricity is that a bunch of electrons are moving somewhere. I would argue that you don't need the electrons to move somewhere. All you need is for them to push on each other. All right, that's it. The force is in the pressure. All you're moving is the pressure. So when electricity goes through a wire, I don't think a bunch of electrons are zooming through the wire. The point is the electrons are pushing pressure between each other. When the atoms expand, and the expansion of the atoms moves down the wire, not the electrons themselves. Anyway, doesn't matter. I mean, it can matter, but it doesn't matter for the sake of this conversation, I don't believe. And basically describes just the exchangeability rate of electrons. Hence fire, plasma burns, acid burns, electricity burns, and a strong flashlight burns. Well, the burning is just the fact that the interactions, the rate that the interactions take place at. So some interactions are very fast, like the oxidation of some things. You put them in atmosphere and they poof. It's just the exchange rate. It's happening so quickly, the bonding, that it burns. So burning is just a fact that something happens so fast. It's like the friction argument. If you make the thing going really slow, the friction won't melt the track. But if you make the thing going really fast, it's going to melt the track because so much turning has to happen so quickly. So much mass has to be converted into a direction that it's very, very excited, and therefore it burns because there's so much activity. So it just really, burning is an activity, the rate at which something happens. And it happens at a very fast rate. Then you have a lot of this waste of heat. So anyway, I mean, obviously the heat is in the time it takes, right? So stuff getting warmer is nice. Stuff burning is different. So that's the only catch to it, is that it's all burning. It's just fast or slow. I mean, the carbon being created in the earth, in the sense of it being purified into hydrocarbons, is a slow burn, right? You take a tree full of a lot of shit and you put it underground, and after 1 million years, you've turned it into its elements by slowly burning off the oxygen carrying molecules. So later I saw chemistry, and especially its acid-base scale, as providing yet another fitting piece to your proposed model. Well, yes, acid base would be about negative and positive ions, so that sort of makes sense. For me, most easily illustrated by the function of a battery. I know chemistry, not that simple. Temperature, pressure are complications, but relatively easily accounted for. I still see it as another two. Well, clearly there's some atomic structures. It's a kind of nuclear physics, right? I mean, in the sense when you're breaking chemicals, you can analogize it to breaking atoms. So when you break the chemistry, you have extra bits that are left over. So when you turn it into some compounds, when you take one big thing and break it into two smaller things, you have some extra bits. And sometimes when you take two smaller things and you combine them into one thing, you have some extra bits. So it just depends on the chemicals and how they react that you can take advantage of those extra bits. Heat. All right, still see it as another two. Well, okay. I mean, I guess I would argue that there's either you either have to consume energy to have the interaction, that is, you have to put more energy in to make the two things stick together, make the bigger thing, or you get energy out. And it just depends on the chemistry, how volatile it is, or whatever the right word would be, how much stability it has. Will tell you whether you have to put energy in or you're going to get energy out when you break it down into something smaller. Components. All right. So it's just more 2 plus 2 in the sense there's only two kinds of interaction, right? Attraction and repulsion. There's lots of twos. 2 is a very popular thing in the universe. Anyway, the other thing where the model fits insanely well in comparison to conventional particle physics is the ever so consistent tendency that smaller systems usually have fewer different parts and interactions than bigger counterparts. Well, that's the tricky part, is that you can have microbes can have more DNA than we have, so it doesn't. There's not some rule you can draw about necessarily size, but I guess I would go more with. That's a good analogy. Well, it doesn't matter. I don't think it's it just seems clear that in principle, okay, like for example, you could use a rope in a Rube Goldberg mechanism, and the complexity of the rope could be more complicated than the Rube Goldberg mechanism, because you made a real simple one than the Rube Goldberg mechanism. But the rule is that generally speaking, the parts evolutionarily get simpler. I don't believe the physicist's so-called particle discoveries suggesting atoms are comprised of what is it currently 3 dozen different subatomic particles. Well, they have over 100 now, but and they must come from atoms, so I guess they got to be doing something inside the atom. An atom is supposed to be a soup with 30 plus ingredients, 100 plus ingredients, and that intricate recipe just happens to happen 10 to the power of whatever times to produce all the atoms throughout the universe. Doubtful. It seems doubtful that it matters. I would first argue that if you're, and again, well, let's just say that we know they call these things particles, yet they can't be sustained as particles. That is, they have no natural lifespan, so they never really exist. So all of these extra things never really exist. You can't collect them somewhere in a jar without artificially making them and then watching them disappear right before your eyes. So in that sense, they're all bullshit. Now, the things like positrons and stuff, well, that's a little different because those aren't accelerator byproducts. Those are some claim that this antiparticle of the electron is somehow floating around somewhere, interfering with everything, and yet there's no evidence or explanation for how it's interfering. I mean, clearly this would make a mess out of an awful lot of atoms to have this positron show up and start fucking around with electrons. Especially the electrons bonding things together. And there's no explanation for how that can possibly work. But anyway, doubtful. So yeah, there's lots of reason to doubt Now nobody wants to do it. Nobody, all these smart people that graduated from high school and then went on to college don't seem to have any will to doubt anything. And so when Professor Lewin says a radio wave is a standing wave, they sit there and buy it for some dopey reason, even though it can't possibly make any sense. Even though he does the experiment demonstrating it can't be a standing wave because look, I'm 10 feet away from the antenna. The light bulb's brighter. I go 8 feet. It's even brighter. I go 6 feet. It's even brighter. There's no nodes. And then when I get about 1.5 feet away from the antenna, the light bulb burns out because there's so much energy. Well, how can that be a standing wave? It's not possible. The nodes are supposed to be 3 meters apart. Well, even if you have that, they're supposed to be 1.5 meters apart. Just doesn't make any sense. And yet people just keep telling me I'm wrong and he's right. No, he's clearly wrong. I mean, clearly. Shit. Alright. The 2 also seems statistically more probable than in that respect. Yes, 2 is a lot simpler than 100. Anyway, however, I asked you something in another video unsuccessfully. Well, so I'll try to max out my consciousness, and I apparently can't without the wordiness. Well, whatever. First on the efficiency of gravity. Oh dear. I don't know how you can measure the efficiency of gravity. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It's clearly the most consistent force in the universe. I mean, it's always right. It always does the same thing. Efficiency, consistency, have to be sort of connected words. Where would the waste be, anyway? I recognize that the rocket moves the astronaut's body just from one direction and has to overcome body's resisting mass. Well, it's not a resisting mass. It's just that it's a mass. And for something to move, you have to push it. So each little tiny butt of every atom, right? Every atom is just sitting there saying, I'm sitting here. You have to push every atom butt in the entire rocket. So every single atom in the rocket has to have its butt pushed up. Every single one. Alright, body resting mass. So there's something, again, mass doesn't resist. Okay, this whole idea that inertia is mass resisting movement. No, it's not resisting. It's just saying I'm not moving until you make me. You have to apply a force. It's just requiring you to make me move for a reason. I don't move for no reason. Anyway, and the body bounces with the body's speed of sound. So I don't know why you're bringing up this sound crap. And the body bounces with the body's speed of sound. So I don't know where you're going with this. There's no bouncing, okay, when the rocket goes off. I mean, you could argue that there's conflict because there's parts of you that are going the wrong way because of gravity. And you have to overcome not only the gravity that's pushing things the wrong way, but you have to actually overcome it. You have to go faster than the force. You have to apply more force than gravity to actually gain on gravity. The atoms are likely rubber balls cascading pressure into the subsequent layers. Well, they're right next to each other. Your mass is clearly charged, attracted, in the sense that the internal low pressure, it's created an internal low pressure so the external world can push it together, right? So the atoms are bound to each other, they're tied to each other. So I don't know if I don't know if bouncing balls is a good analogy. Starting from the atoms closest to the source of the push. Yes, well obviously that's where the compression starts, and it'll break your legs. If the acceleration is fast enough, it just breaks your legs, right? Just like you falling off a building, the stuff that hits the ground first is going to get the worst of it, and the velocity is going to start slowing down. Your eyeballs are going to move a little bit slower as the rest of your body crushes underneath you. All right. As if the rocket was a box made of tennis rackets, and one of the rackets on the back wall of the rocket hits the ball astronaut, and the ball has a discrete bounce which the propulsion struggles to compensate for. Well, you're getting the idea. Well, the point is that it takes time for the energy, the push, to go to every atom butt and push each one of the atom butts. It just takes, you can just understand, it's going to take time to do that. That takes time. And this event is happening at a time scale. And so clearly if gravity's acting on you and it's hitting every butt, more efficient, a lot more efficiently, because it's hitting each little exposed butt at the same time, because it's a little tiny spread raindrops. And then you take it's like a hose. You spread the water at the hose, at the nozzle, you can cover a lot more ground. But if you have to take the hose and move it across all the ground, it's going to take a lot more time to cover. All right. That's all I can only give you analogies. Okay, while the same astronaut's body belly flopping towards Earth doesn't have to deal with that squishing and bouncing, all his atoms seem like they're being pulled more or less simultaneously. Well, when he hits the ground, you'll see the inverse reaction. So, but his velocity is going to be extremely high. It's not going to be the 1g that your rocket is taking off at. It's going to be what the rocket would do if the rocket hit a brick wall once it's up to full speed. So the fact is that you just have to account for the speed difference. So, but the same thing is going to happen when the astronaut hits the Earth. It's just going to happen much quicker because he's going much faster, so you're going to see the pancake. All right, virtually no bouncing. Well, there'll be lots of it when he hits the ground. Lots of pieces will bounce off. Or, considering that gravity is a force, or lack thereof, that's the tricky thing. The gravity is a change in the field of force. You can't, there's no point in saying anything like zero gravity, implying there's zero force. The normal force is balance. Anything that imbalances you could call gravity, I suppose. Traveling through his front and then his back. The layers of atoms comprising his face, belly button, toes transfer the gravitability layer by layer to this occiput, lower back and heels. The point is gravity is the water spread, and it gets over all the surfaces at once. The hose, it means that you have to have 1,000 pounds of pressure, and you start denting whatever it is you're spraying with the water because it's high pressure. So the pressure isn't, as you stated, this is sort of an efficiency argument. Gravity spreads the pressure, making for less waste in the sense that you're not destroying the matter. Where if I apply the force just to one part of you and all of the force to that one part, I'm going to end up destroying it, likely, drilling a hole through it. All right. Finally, I'll rephrase my criticism. Fuck you. What I meant by, isn't the consistency of gravity's strength convenient? There's nothing convenient about it. I mean, it's clearly a tiny force. So why would you say it comes in laser beams when it's obviously not a laser beam? Right? I mean, that's a good analogy. I can take the same amount of light, the same number of photons, and I can make the photons go somewhat in a path. And obviously, it's going to have more of an effect on the place it hits than if I let the light spread. So if I let the light spread, it just warms. If I confine the light and hit just one location, I burn it. Okay. If gravity is a bunch of waste radiation, you call it that, I didn't call it that ever. Push forces. Again, I didn't say the push is in the cosmic background radiation. The push is from the universe. Diverted, broken down, phase shifted, reflected. Well, that only happens between all these little charge things. So if you put a whole bunch of these little charge things together, then you start getting all kinds of funky pathways. You start lasering the force. all of it together, shouldn't space still be comprised of particles where there's randomly more gravitational push in a seemingly non-sensical direction? Well, as stated, let's see, this is sort of, you can't make a big enough ray gun. Well, it's sort of like, okay, you could say the galactic jets might be an example of a gigantic distortion in the sense that it's expelling a whole bunch of energy in one direction, okay, that it's making out of what it has stored. So it's losing energy to create the jet. Maybe everybody would agree with that. Okay, so rotational energy is being absorbed, velocity is being reduced to shoot a bunch of particles in one direction. So there has to be a whole bunch of interactions that change the velocity of things, and obviously any velocity in the direction of the jet, there has to be an equal and opposite reaction. So you have to argue that if it's jetting in one way, then it has to be jetting the opposite way, in the other direction. So it's just basically expelling any energy it has held trapped. It's letting loose, and it's letting obviously as many this way as it is that way. It couldn't jet in one direction without being moved in the opposite direction, quite obviously. An asteroid drifting left when it seemingly had no right to. An asteroid drifting left when it seemingly had no right to. Well, I don't know what, I can't, sorry, incomprehensible. You're saying are there places in space that have strong enough gravity imbalance to move an asteroid? Well, I guess I would say that yes, if an asteroid drifts into a jet, from a galactic jet, then it'll move. But you think the Earth and the Moon's relationship is capable of creating a disproportion in gravity that would be significant enough for something to be moved by it? I don't know. I don't think so. All right. Just because a bunch of force leftovers, I mean, you have to understand all these forces are diverging over distance. So, any distance from something and the force is really weak. Okay. Inverse square law thing, just because a bunch of force left over from different corners of the galaxy happen to concentrate there. Well, they can't concentrate, so that seems pretty unlikely. I don't know how to make anything out of that. I really just don't. As I pointed out, gravitational waves are just, it's just a non-starter. So even if you have two black holes orbiting each other, the only thing you really can detect gravitationally is the average of their position. And so when they're this way, the average of their position is here. But when they're this way, the average of their position is forward. So the only thing that changes is the center of their gravity. So if you count their gravity as one object rather than two objects, the motion means that their center of their gravity moves a few hundred feet or something. Well, obviously at 1 billion light years away, you're not going to detect the tiny difference, even at the r² rule, between those two positions. All right, like predicting and focusing a bunch of energy decay to make a helium balloon fall or something. Yeah, well, you're just not recognizing how much of a difference in gravity you need to make that happen. It's a huge difference. All right, or to name a less conclusive but more easier to do for space, releasing a sizable sphere of liquid water near the Earth to watch how it deforms during its fall. Well, it deforms and it's, just sitting there in a sense. It'll take a long time for it to stop deforming just because there's so little friction in its world, right? So any motion you give it, it doesn't release the motion without having to release some part of its atomic structure. So any movement inside of it kind of stays inside of it. So it'd be very hard to create a quiet sphere of water in the first place because there's no friction inside. So all the motion inside is stuck inside of it, and it just isn't going away easily. It's reflecting, and it's going to just keep reflecting inside the water unless the water breaks off into little pieces. The only way you can get rid of the motion is to let the motion loose by losing some of its matter. We could see, so that's the problem, it's just hard to make quiet water. We could see how gravity fares against the hydrogen bride bonds. Maybe. Somewhat. Well, whatever. So I don't know how this is a criticism of anything I've pointed out. I don't understand why you think there's some inconsistencies beyond the ones I've described as possible. And I'm sort of pointing out that, even black holes can't create inconsistencies, so to speak, that would be dramatic enough at a distance to be able to be detected. I mean, the amount of gravity human-sized objects, objects we can experiment with, make is so small. So, if you have an asteroid, it's really hard to detect its gravity. You need a really big asteroid, and when they've done that, they've found inconsistencies in the gravity based on the density, the lumpiness of the asteroid. So the thin parts of the asteroid have less gravity than the thick parts, but we already sort of know that, that in the Earth example, there's technically more gravity, at the equator than there is at the North Pole. All right. But it's a tiny difference on something as big as a fucking Earth. All right. So then somebody says, do you realize when you bring a magnet near a stream of water, it doesn't attract, right? Well, again, you haven't brought a strong magnet, have you? Have you done that experiment? No. So it will. There's no different than any other charge experiment. So anything that has ions is going to be able to be moved by a magnet. The point is that obviously magnets work different than charges. Okay, so in the sense of this R versus R cubed. R versus R cubed. Big difference. Shit. His reply is, but the magnet isn't strong enough. Yes, exactly. But to anyone who is paying attention even a little bit can see that that's just an excuse for a major fuck-up made by his theory. So I'm just making an excuse by pointing out, again, Maxwell figured this stuff out, okay? It's in Maxwell's equations. R for direct charges, the R rule, two charges facing each other. R squared for charges at a distance, and not atomic charges. And R cubed, okay, for dipoles. I didn't make it up. David, your conventional physics says so. I didn't make up those rules. That's your conventional physics. So they fucked up then, apparently. So my excuse, which is Maxwell's equations, is my fuck up. That sounds pretty lame. So the very fact that they're pointing out how in a photon, electromagnetic radiation, the magnetic portion of the wave is whatever, 1,000,000 times weaker than the electrical portion of the wave. That's not an indication that, yes, magnetism is clearly weaker, okay, at a distance than charge. But I would argue, if you could get close enough to the magnet where you're right next to the North Pole of the atomic magnet, it's just as strong. But you can't get that close. So anyway, no, his theory doesn't fit everything so well. You need to get your head out of his ass, sir. So just this snarky crap, rude to the other commenter, which is just totally unnecessary, a lame argument, right? He's just telling me, he's just saying, you can't have the theory that dipoles dilute the force and therefore the force is weaker. You can't say that. Oh yeah, I can. It's stronger if you have another magnet, right? So if I put another magnet near a magnet, then it's going to be very strong because it's polarized just like the other thing is polarized. So it's going to get rid of your dilution problem. All right? But if I just put a single charge next to the magnet, well, there now the diluted thing becomes a problem, especially at a distance. It's quite obvious. Fucking asshole. All right. So he says, is that so? I've never seen it tried, but that could also have a bunch of answers. Well, there's one answer that answers it. I've never seen his answer to it that either. Well, I've answered it before. Hey, only because I talk out of my ass doesn't mean my head is in it. I'll have you know my knowledge on the topic is just enough to ask questions. My answer seeking lies. My answer seekery. I don't think so. Lies in other departments. So I rely on others when it comes to physics. Well, I wouldn't rely on anybody. I mean, these are all experiments. Experiments can be dissected and you can be explained honestly or dishonestly, right? So that's sort of the argument. Professor Lewin did an experiment demonstrating that radio waves are standing waves, when clearly the demonstration was crap and the theory is nonsense, and you can kind of point it out. Just like when he says there's two voltages in the same location, and you can point out, no, your measuring device has been corrupted by being in the experiment. Your probes are in the experiment. They're getting affected by the radiation in the experiment, and it's just pointless for you to tell me you're reading accurate voltages when your probes are in the experiment. I mean, simple things like that. And then I could go on and on about the two-slit experiment and their interpretations and the single slit. And if you just point out the details that water doesn't do in the single slit, doesn't match at all. You point out that double slit's creating two patterns. You point out that the single impediment and the single slit, the single impediment and the single slit have one thing in common, which is the distance between the surfaces, which is the only thing that's important in the fucking experiment, is how far away are the surfaces. They're the things affecting the pressure, which is affecting how much diversion you get. I mean, you can do all this stuff. You can honestly understand when somebody's, fucking around with the details. I've pointed out the geometry for jamming a radio signal is identical to the geometry of wave interference. Which one seems more likely? Photons interfering with each other, or you've just ruined the ability of your receiver to detect the frequency. Alright, and after rolling my eyes at hundreds of documentaries, I'm glad that or at least one channel deals with videos in a play, pause, play, and point-by-point fashion. Yes, and you have to admit that this is pretty much the only outlet that goes out of its way to eliminate magic or simply rely on analogies, or to not scrutinize details about experiments that you're going to claim are the nail in the coffin evidence or the foundational explanation. Again, nobody takes the interferometer and puts single photons in it. Does the interferometer work because single photons interfere with themselves, or does it work because different photons interfere with each other? They can't answer the simplest fucking questions, and yet they're telling us, believe me when I tell you I could measure how thick a hair is on Alpha Centauri with my device here. Right? My device can tell. I mean, they have this extraordinary claim. Nothing as evidence. They're claiming they have some perfect theory, that somehow is related to Einstein, although Einstein would totally... he'd punch you in the face if you said he said this, that matter turns into bent geodesic. No, Einstein never said anything like that. Well, where's the theory? Where did it come from? Where was it scrutinized? Did anybody ever scrutinize this theory that black holes collide and their matter is converted into some sort of new form of energy that isn't a push and it isn't a pull? So it's not gravity, it's not charge, it's not light, it's not any kind of radiation we know of. It's some sort of super new bent geodesic mush that doesn't really disturb anything. It just vibrates things. And so it doesn't make any changes in the universe. It just shakes things a little bit. Complete horse shit. There's no gravitational theory that does push and pull, that contracts space this way and expands space this way. There is none. There's no theory. Einstein didn't believe that. It's made up crap. Desperately made up crap. It's dark matter bullshit. The theory doesn't work. Let's fix it by making an invisible man to patch it up. Let's make a perfect criminal to be to be guilty of the crime. Oh, there's a girl with her head off. Let's just invent a perfect criminal. He's invisible. He can wear any size shoes. He can wear any size gloves. He's the perfect criminal. Okay, let's blame him. That's all this crap is, and it's obviously crap. And it's obviously that bad. Dark matter is desperately silly. There's a new form of matter we've never heard of that's invisible. I mean, yes, but it has gravity. It doesn't do anything else matter does except, yes, it has gravity. And we can put it anywhere we want to. It can be randomly placed anywhere. It doesn't obey any laws of physics. It's just so bad. As it is a side effect of someone who spent many skill points on philosophy. I don't know what that means, but whatever. Also, do you have thoughts on the other points? What other points? I don't know what that even means. Are a competing comprehensive theory. Oh, I guess he's talking to the asshole. Yes, can you point me to a link of your better explanation of how a magnet works? So just keep asking the trolls that, would you please? Just keep asking them to point you to the link that explains more simply or completely how a magnet works than my theory. Show me the competing theory that makes more sense. Show it to me, fuckhead. That's simpler and more complete. Alright, it's basically poured out of my heart here. After basically walking on eggshells and clenching my cheeks throughout the writing process, it would be nice to see someone else make their theoretical cornerstones attackable. Yes, it would be interesting to see them answer a fucking single question. Do single photons interfere with each other, or do different photons interfere? And there's just some dopey reason that you don't have. Why can't two flashlights interfere with each other? And yet radar can. Two radar flashlights can. Why? Why the difference? All right. Long comment. Anyway, all right. So, incognito or something. That's not going to be not a very good name from my perspective. I'll just tell you frankly, asshole. In less than 30, send. You'll realize. So you can't even write. Okay, in less than 30. Send, you'll realize this point is wasting your time and is piggybacking off. Okay, so Ken Wheeler's research while displaying the point of Ken Wheeler. This is, I say, cause can shifts dimensions and can't do that without understanding the dielectric field. Hint, I threw in a gem. Oh, goodbye. Just too inarticulate. Sorry. I don't even know what to say to that. What can I say to it? What the fuck was that? So the woat, which is apparently the cowboy. The maniac, it doesn't matter. You get it. Megalomaniac comedy on this channel continues. So again, if you know, there's nothing to say, right? So anybody who challenges the authority, right? The authorities are correct. Anybody who challenges them is an egomaniacal kook. Blah 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 blah. All right. In 2009, trying desperately to get attention by attacking other posters and getting ignored. What sense does that even make again? I don't know. So you shouldn't argue with anybody. Oh, I see. And nobody else attacks anybody on the internet. There's nobody attacking other people's positions or statements at all. That doesn't happen on the internet anywhere. What a silly thing for me to be doing. Stealing stuff from other people. Okay, there's absolutely no evidence that I've ever taken a single one of my ideas from anybody, so that's just more crap. Without understanding any of it and getting ignored. So again, what is somebody else's copyright exactly? Where have I violated any copyright? Somebody else thought of it first. Flogging the idiotic theory of yours and getting ignored. So again, the fact that I'm getting ignored will be on you. So why don't you put your real name here? So you can be the icon, the poster child for dumbass. Because when I'm proven right, you're going to be obviously wrong, and wrong in some spectacular way. You know, you're going to be spectacularly wrong. And everybody should know your face. Everybody should know who the most spectacularly wrong asshole on earth is. You know, let your children, your prodigy, let your relatives feel the pain. You know, give them the privilege of, having to say, shit, I'm related to that dirtbag. That dirty, stinking, smelly crap. That weak coward. That fucking flaming coward. Oh, I'm related to the flaming coward. Alright, still trying desperately to get attention by attacking other posters. Yes, by even bribing them, doing all kinds of things, but they're too cowardly to show up. They're cowards like you. Alright, still stealing stuff. So again, he just keeps saying the same thing. Yeah, okay, fine. There's no evidence, okay? I'm just saying. So here's an accusation from this pedophile. This internet pedophile troll who's probably molested all kinds of things, blah, 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 blah. And there's just no evidence. Zero. Alright. Welfare authorities, wise up. Your anxiety disorder scam. So again, you know, I mean, they'll even attack that, right? So I'm not allowed to have a physiological condition. Okay, that's not allowed. And you're certainly not allowed to have an opinion if you have one. So anybody who's a cripple in some way, they're not allowed to have opinions anymore. They don't have any freedom or rights, you know, because they'll be attacked in this personal way by these trolls, you know, and threatened. You know, their welfare will be threatened by these trolls. And this is the internet you've chosen to allow people to operate on. These unaccountable terror. They're just verbal terrorists. They're too weak to be real terrorists. They're too cowardly to be real terrorists. So they can only do it with words. You know, veiled threats. You know, what a fucking piece of work you are, you hideous piece of shit. Again, maybe that comment right there. You know, those ones implying, threatening, trying to threaten my status as a disabled person. Yeah, maybe. You know, I mean, it's a real physical. I have an anxiety disorder, a severe personality disorder. It's a fact. Okay, ruined my life. Just ruined it. Prevented me from going to college. All the things. Again, I was accepted. Already paid to go to college. Already paid the first, month's tuition, and these people will sit there and try to threaten me with my status somehow because I have an opinion. So maybe I can use that in court. So when I'm proven right, I'll use that in court to demonstrate this guy is threatening my welfare. He's a terrorist, and I should know who the fuck he is. So I'll threaten you back, fuckhead. You know, why YouTube lets these people run free like this, these fucking pieces of shit. Yeah, you block their channel, they just let them make another fucking woke channel over and over and over again. You're a fucking terrorist. That's it. And you're a weak one. You put up nothing. You fucking coward. Now on to, another pathetic coward most of the time, the holiday. How does GR require gravity be doubly effective against photons? Well, why don't you just fucking look it up? Newton's equation predicts a photon moves 0.72 arc seconds, or whatever the fuck it is, right? That's why Einstein got the headline, jackass. Einstein proven right. Well, what do you think he was proven right about? He was proven right about the fact that the photon really moves 1.27 arc seconds. A doubling of Newton's number, essentially a doubling. I don't know what the rest of the equation is. Go look the fucking equation up, jackass. Newton's equation says 2 pi something or other for the velocity equation, and Einstein's equation says 4 pi. It's that fucking obvious. In one equation there's a 2, and in the other equation there's a fucking 4. You can't tell that's a doubling? I mean, I shouldn't have to argue this with anybody. I mean, this is old news. Okay, Newton's math predicts it's always about velocity, right? We already know that the mass doesn't have anything to do with it, right? We know that if I put a speck of dirt at the same location as the Earth with the same velocity, it'll stay in orbit, exactly like the Earth, even though it's just one speck of dust. So mass is irrelevant technically. Mass, the force always applies whatever mass is. So whatever your mass is, that's how much force you'll consume. So the force is completely proportional to your mass. So it's irrelevant. And the only thing that matters is velocity. So the only thing that's going to decide whether you fly out of orbit or you don't fly out of orbit is your fucking velocity. It doesn't matter what your mass is. Your velocity is deciding what orbit you're in. Velocity is everything. Mass is nothing to orbiting mechanics. All right, and we're talking about orbiting mechanics in the sense the only thing that creates orbits, dumbass, is fucking gravity, dumb shit. There's nothing else creating the orbit except the force of fucking gravity, asswipe. If there was no gravity, the thing would just fly fucking straight, dumbass. So, I mean, this is so stupid. I mean, you sit there and say you know mathematics, you've got a degree in mathematics, and I have to explain to you the mathematical difference between fucking Newton's predictions and Einstein's predictions? Fuck you. Alright, it doesn't. Both the particle or without mass follow a minimum geodesic path through the strong gravitational field. Obviously they don't. The geodesic is the inverse square law, jackass. Okay, Newton says it's the inverse square law. Einstein says it's the inverse square law. So you tell me where this gamma function can possibly create twice the amount of gravity. So you want to theorize that the faster you go, the more gravity there is. So you want me to reword it to say that the faster your velocity, the more you're bent by gravity. So the theory is, Einstein's theory either is, the faster you go, even if you're the Earth, the more you're affected by gravity. Or the theory has to be, yes, photons are different than all the other material stuff. So I change the equation when I'm dealing with something moving the speed of light. There's one equation, and there's a different equation for things not moving the speed of light. Pick your choice. It doesn't matter. The point is clear. The point is that when you calculate for a photon, Einstein says there's twice as much movement of the photon by gravity. Fact. God, stupid cunt. Sorry. So yes, I'm obviously being much more offensive to the asshole, but he's been much more offensive in the past. So I don't have any obligation to be polite with this crappy statement, this assertion. Both particle with or without mass follow a minimum geodesic path through the strong gravitational field. They obviously don't. Explain to me what the geodesic is made out of then. If the geodesic isn't the fucking inverse square law, okay, then what's causing the effect, asshole? Time dilation. Well, then the point is that time dilation somehow makes photons twice as affected by gravity, because that's the end result, you dumb shit. I mean, again, I didn't make this up. The New York Times headline made it up. Eddington made it up, okay? Newton's theory predicts 0.72 deflection for the photon, arc seconds of deflection for the photons. Einstein's theory is 1.27. I didn't make that up. They did. I'm going to delete it just because his assertion is wrong. All right. God, I just... I hate people. Yeah. Generally speaking, there's always something about all of you that's quite hateable. Just a fact. I wish it didn't matter. I mean, I wish I could just go to a place in the universe where nothing's consequential, because nothing will be affected by assholes. Assholes won't be pulling anybody else's strings. They won't be making everything suck. But that's the truth. You assholes are dangerous and destructive, and you shouldn't be allowed to stay ignorant. You're belligerently doing it. I mean, somebody tells you you're belligerently being ignorant. Pi does not equal 4 retards. The fucking earth is not flat, retards. I mean, there's no fucking electric universe. The craters on the goddamn moon were not created by sparks, you fucking idiots. There's no hyperburloids in atoms. Atoms aren't doing any hyperburloiding, and they're not doing any toroiding and all this fucking bullshit. Jesus fucking Christ. I just can't stand it. Sorry. Till the next charming encounter.